And so, part of my passion for giving back and leadership is I want to find people who had bad hands dealt to them and hopefully provide another way out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so very much, Doug Smith. Doug is the executive director. What is your title?
Assistant executive director. Yeah. Assistant. Okay. Some people say assistant to the executive director for those office fans.
For Light of Life Rescue Mission here in town. You're also the founder of L3 Leadership, amazing podcast, the amazing leadership program that you do in person. So it's a huge honor to have you with us here today. So thank you very much, Doug.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. Love both of you guys. I have good relationships with both, so let's have some fun.
Yeah. Absolutely. So why don't you kind of start with your background and a little bit of your story?
Yeah, so if you want my whole story, let me know. I can dive into that. But yeah, vocationally, like you mentioned, I work at Light of Life. So we've been serving the homeless men, women, and children of our city since 1952. So here in Pittsburgh for over 70 years, and I've been there for 14. Most of my background is in development, so fundraising, which I accidentally stumbled into. But that went very, very well. And then most recently became the assistant ED. So now kind of oversee the day-to-day operations of the whole organization. So that's a lot of fun. And you've been so helpful as we've implemented EOS, which has been a game changer for us internally. So that's my day job. As you mentioned, I'm very passionate about leadership development, primarily because I barely graduated high school. I was a drug dealer and lost my mom my senior year of high school. And through that experience, really, I can go into it if you want, but ended up turning my life around and had mentors come into my life, such as you guys, and basically tell me, like, Doug, you have leadership potential. You could be a leader if you actually apply yourself. And thankfully, because of those mentors, I was able to get serious about personal development and growth. And I often tell people, if it weren't for those people coming to my life and ultimately becoming a person of faith, I'd be more likely to be someone walking through the doors of Light of Life in need than someone working there. So that's where the passion for leadership came. I just thought, if I can do for other leaders what leaders did for me and can transform a life the way mine's been transformed, I'll give the rest of my life for that. So that's the leadership piece. And then on the personal note, we were just talking, I'm married to my high school sweetheart, which that was a miracle in of itself. And been married for 13 years, together for almost 23, I think. And we have 5 kids. We just had our 5th kid a few weeks ago in January. So we are busy.
Congratulations. You now have a full basketball team. So
that's right.
That's good.
Are you done having kids, or
I hope so. Yeah. We could go more into that as we were talking about, but yes, if my wife gets pregnant again, you'll never see me on a podcast ever again. Yeah.
And you also have a podcast as well, right?
Yeah.
Shout out to your podcast. We should be doing like a dual podcast right now, I feel like,
Yeah, well, if you guys are open, I always repurpose when I'm a guest, so would love that. But yeah, the L3 Leadership Podcast, I always say I started podcasting before it was cool, so launched in 2012, and we're about 425 episodes in. Shout out to the Endosha crew over here for editing and producing it. Endosha Marketing Solutions. Yes. Check them out, endosha.com. Sorry.
400 plus episodes. We've talked about this before, just consistency and how important that is. What's been your podcast journey? Maybe some lessons learned for us as we build this out. Yeah.
Anyone who wants to start, one, if you don't start where you are, you stay where you are. I mean, you guys have a pretty nice studio and setup for just starting. I literally started with a recorder on a couch with my father-in-law. Terrible audio quality. But what I love is so many people now come to me and say, I started listening to the first 100 episodes and I can't believe how far you've come. And so if you don't start where you are, you're going to stay where you are. That would be one. 2 is, like, it is a skill set. I was just talking to my wife about this last night. Like, to be in your guys' seats, the interviewer, like, it's just not natural for people. Like, it's not something you just get. Some people maybe, but in general, like, I've had to grow immensely in my job sitting in your guys' seats. A lot of it was just because of insecurities that I had and fear of looking dumb in front of a guest, or just fearing, like, this person's way more known than I am. Like, why am I even in this room? And so learning how to interview was key. But I think what you said is the biggest thing, just consistency. I think I forget the actual podcast stat of how many podcasts there are, but I want to say that like 90% of them never go past 10 episodes. Exactly, yeah. So everyone's super excited to start, but no one can finish. And so if you just stay in the game, you'll be surprised. And, even looking at downloads, the whole game of putting all this pressure on yourself, how many listens, right. I always watch this video Gary Vaynerchuk has called 1 is greater than 0. And his whole point is like, are you willing to take an hour of your time to get 20, 30 views on YouTube? I am, because you don't know who's viewing that. And it only takes one view for everything to change. And it's that one view that can change someone's life forever. So that perspective helped me, especially in the beginning, because I want to say for the first 4 years, man, I had like no listenership. And then to see how it's taken off and grown over the past, 10 years that I've been doing it is just phenomenal. So, 1 is greater than 0.
You kind of learn each time, make some tweaks and improve and figure out how to, ask better questions or bring out different emotions, right? You just kind of...
The two biggest game changers for me feedback-wise on the interviewer side was, one, I always ask for feedback at the end. So, hey, what can I do to get better? And I don't get feedback often, but two people who interview people for a living, one of them said to me, Doug, I listened to your podcast, which that was humbling, and he said, it sounds like when you're interviewing your guests, you're so focused on getting to your next planned question that you don't actually listen to what your guest's saying, and you don't follow where your curiosity could lead, and that's what makes a great interview. And I was like, okay, I kind of sensed that, but I didn't know what to do with it. And this other guy named Ken Coleman, who works for Dave Ramsey, I told him that feedback that I got, and he said, well, what are you afraid of? And I said, what do you mean, what am I afraid of? He said, you're afraid of something. It's not the audience. You're not in front of a live audience. He goes, you're afraid of the person you're interviewing and afraid of looking dumb, and you feel like, you're not as good as them. And I was like, that's it. And so I really had to develop the confidence to be able to just listen, and let the conversation, and not just be such a control freak because I'm insecure.
That's awesome. Yeah. What great advice. Thank you.
Taking notes here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You guys seem very confident.
Well, we know we are the dumbest people in the room. So we're already there.
Not true.
So let's kind of start with your journey. So high school, like drug dealer, not rosy.
I do want to hear the actual story.
Not a rosy upbringing, right? You faced some shit, right, throughout your life, and it's crazy for me because I know you so well to hear that story, because I only know this version of Doug, right? Yeah. And I have to tell you, I can count on one hand the people in my life that are absolutely 100% intentional with everything they do, whether it's job, family, faith, and you're one of those people.
Well, thank you.
Right. And so I admire you so much. So I see like the Doug that I've known for the last several years. So take us back, to your origin story, so to speak, and
sure.
And kind of what was going on in your life, and how did you overcome through that?
Yeah, so I grew up in a pretty normal family home, and life was normal, I would say, until middle school. And in middle school, two significant things happened. One was I got invited to a Baptist camp, and again, I'm a person of faith, and this is just part of my story, but for me, I heard the gospel for the first time, and at the end of that camp, I felt like I was supposed to give my life to Christ, and so I did, and I felt called to go into ministry as a 7th grader, which is crazy to think about vocationally. And started going to a church with a healthy family, I would say, for about 2 years. And I would go to this church, and I had mentors there and loved it. But at the same time, my mom got diagnosed. She had a rare nerve disease in her legs. If you've ever had pins and needles, she started having that 24 hours a day. As a result, she ended up in a wheelchair, barely could walk. Toward the end of her life, she ended up basically being in bed all the time. But that went from having a normal family life to basically my mom being in bed all the time. My dad had to get a second job. He was a bus driver during the week, and on the weekends, he would drive for Giant Eagle. And so I had no boundaries. Literally, I was able to do whatever I want whenever I wanted, which when you're in middle school, you think is like the greatest thing ever. So as a result of that, hung out with the wrong crowd. Summer of 8th grade, kid pulls out a pipe in the middle of the woods. Start passing. I'm like, wow, this is what they tell you about in school. Like, what am I going to do? Ended up smoking weed, getting into that, and totally falling away from the family and the church whole scene. Ended up partying all throughout high school. Determined then that I would never amount to anything. I thought, hey, I'll just be a janitor or a bus driver. And there's nothing wrong with either of those vocations. But I just thought, I don't have to try in school. And so I had to go to summer school every single year. Found out my mom had these pills called Oxycontins, which is basically synthetic heroin. Started selling those in my school. and just thought I was living the dream, really. And then my senior year of high school was when things really began to change. My senior year, my mom died, and I know that sounds grim, but for me, I had seen her suffer so much, especially in the last 6 months of her life, that to see her go was actually a relief. But one thing did bother me, and again, just being a person of faith, and I don't know why, because I did not care about God at all, but this question just kept coming in my heart, like, you don't know if your mom had a relationship with God, and you're never going to know that. And I would get drunk and high every single night, and that question would just torment me. 3 months passed. I'm still being tormented. Nobody knows this. And I get a call one random Saturday morning. It was a distant relative. She's much older than me. I had no relationship with her. And she just said, Doug, I feel like God put you on my heart this morning and wanted me to let you know that I was a nurse in the hospital with your mom, and I led your mom into a relationship with Christ a few weeks before she died. And I think God wants you to know that. And I don't know anything else that she said. My knees hit the ground immediately. I remember crying, putting out my arms and saying, God, whatever you want for the rest of my life, I'm yours. Most powerful prayer I've ever prayed. And 2 weeks later, randomly, I say, got invited to a Bible study at a mom led in our high school, and 150 kids would go to this every week. And so I went, this girl invited me, and as soon as I went back, that whole passion I had in middle school was reignited. I saw this beautiful girl on the couch, and I thought, hey, I'm going to Bible study every week. Turns out the girl, her mom was the one leading the Bible study. So we leave that night, and I tell my friends, I said, guys, I met the girl I'm going to marry, talking about the girl I saw. She told her mom, I can't believe Doug came to Bible study tonight. He's one of the most influential kids in our high school, but he uses all of his influence for drugs and alcohol. If he ever got a hold of God, I think he could change the world. And so for whatever reason, that mom and that dad felt led to start having me over for family dinners. And I'll just pause here to say, I was having a conversation with my friend probably a year ago. He's my tax attorney, Brendan Conley. And he said, hey man, I know your story. How many kids do you think that had a hand dealt to them like you did actually get out and are living the kind of life you're living today? And I'm an optimist, and I said probably 50%, and he's a little more realist, and he said, I would say probably 5, if that. And man, when he said that, I'm still chewing on it. I feel like that's going to be a book I read called The Way Out. That's been on my heart. And when the number one thing that I've seen of ways that kids get out of situations that are terrible is someone else has to show them another way. And so for me, it was this family, the Stidell family. They started bringing me over for family dinners, and for the first time in my life, I saw what a healthy, godly family looked like. I saw what a healthy family marriage looked like, and I saw a vision of what my life could be if I started living differently, and that, honestly, was an absolute game changer for me. They ended up bringing me to their church, where I ended up interning. Now, again, talking about career and how, literally, I started I didn't even know what an internship was. I just thought I'd be working at church and it would impress Laura, the girl, which it didn't. And so I started working there for free, but a youth pastor there, he was the first person to really pour leadership into me, tell me that I'm a leader, give me leadership resources.
What age was this about?
I was 17, 18 years old, just graduated high school. And you talk about intentionality, and I know we talked about hey, how did you develop into the leader you are today? He taught me so much of the foundation that he laid in my 20s is absolutely critical to who I am today, and I'll be forever grateful for my spoiler alert, I did marry the girl. It is her family, but her family and that youth pastor, if it weren't for those two people intentionally investing in me, again, I would more likely, just to go into that, I have a younger sister who's 2 years younger than me. We were both going down the same path I was headed. And when my mom died, you can kind of hear my life started turning around and going one direction. My sister just kept going down the same direction we both were going. And unfortunately, she ended up becoming a heroin addict. She ended up homeless twice. And, I can share about Light of Life. She was in our program at Light of Life multiple times. And I could talk about that, but we ended up losing her to an overdose in 2019. And I often think if it weren't for just some of these things happening in my life that clicked for whatever reason, that could be me. And so, part of my passion for giving back and leadership is I want to find people who had bad hands dealt to them and hopefully provide another way out so they don't have to live the lives that they're trapped in bondage. And so that's kind of a high-level overview. Happy to dive deep into any of those things.
I've heard your story before, but just sitting here, in person, hearing it, man, it's an incredible story. And I think you are changing the world, in what you're doing now. And it's pretty phenomenal, and I'm ready for the book. I'm ready to read that book whenever you write it.
Couple things that really hit me on that story, right? First, I think a lot of us think, well, if some things would have gone wrong, I might have been someone at Light of Life. But you have very concrete, tangible, your sister, right, was there. That's not just a statement that you make, that like that's very much true and on your heart. And then the other thing is being able to speak into you at a young age and say that you can be a leader of men and women. You can change the world, right? You can influence people for the gospel and for good instead of negatively. And now knowing the Doug I know, how true that is, right? How many people listen to your podcast? How many people have attended your L3 leadership? How many lives you've changed through Light of Life? Like, they spoke into you, and that has multiplied tenfold, if not thousandfold. And so that's just such an amazing story.
Thank you. And I would just add, when you say that, when I usually share my story, like in a formal setting, my talk is basically called Ordinary People Doing Ordinary Things, Make an Extraordinary Difference. Because when people think about making a difference, they think of these people on Instagram, I have to have a following of 1 million people. When I look back, it was an ordinary girl inviting me to a Bible study. It was a friend that invited me to church camp to change my life. It was a youth pastor who saw a diamond in the rough. It was these ordinary people that made an extraordinary difference. And all they did, it was that woman that called me. She just...
that's the one I keep thinking about, is the call from when you're going through this, and, the drugs and everything else, and every night trying to answer this question, which I imagine at that time, you expect is never going to get answered, right? Like, and that's going to haunt you for forever, right?
Yeah.
And the connections and the faith and, the things that have to happen for that phone call, because I don't know, you're on the other side of the phone thinking, I feel like God's telling me I need to make this phone call for whatever reason, and then to actually do it. Yeah. And then to see the domino effect or the ripple effect from that is
my mother-in-law that started the Bible study. She was scared to death. Thought, why would I start a Bible study for high school kids? What high school kid's going to listen to me? Started with 3 kids, ended up being 150 kids, transformed hundreds of lives. She was just a simple mom. She'd sit on the couch for hours after Bible study, just talking to kids about being bound in addiction and sex and all these different things that they were dealing with. Just amazing. I always mention a shout out to my high school assistant principal. Again, if you're a teacher out there, I got called down to the office, got in trouble with my buddy, and he just said, you guys are leaders, and you're here all the time, and you can use your influence for good or bad, and you're using it for bad. Use it for good. And we laughed at him, but I was able to speak at our baccalaureate service 10 years later, and able to, the day before he retired, I didn't even know, and just be able to say, you may not even remember me ever being in your office, but you said one thing to me that stuck with me forever, and I'll be forever grateful. He was the first person to actually tell me I had leadership potential in my life. So,
wow,
ordinary things.
What an amazing story. And we were, just talking about mentorship, right? And the power that mentorship can have on lives, and that magnifying effect and multiplying effect. And, another great example of all of the mentors that you've had throughout your life that have helped you become who you are today.
Yeah. How do you approach mentorship now as you start to pass that on and speak into other people that can maybe have similar experiences? What are some?
Yeah. So my process, so I mentioned Larry Betancourt is the youth pastor that poured into us. He would have leaders such as yourselves come in and speak to us as interns, and he'd say, hey, if you connected with Tim or Josh, and you thought they were a great leader, ask them out to coffee. And he gave us this whole process. So this is actually how my podcast got started. So for 10 years, I did this pre-podcast. But one, I'm always creating a bucket list of people that I would like to meet with. So, hey, who's on my bucket list? And then I just work that list, reaching out to them and doing some research, but basically just asking. Now, I will add with podcasting, it's a little bit of a bonus because now with the podcast is kind of my hook. So it's not like, hey, Tim, will you meet me and mentor me? But hey, could I record our conversation together? Because not only will you add value to me in our mentoring conversations, but now it'll open up to everyone I influence as well. That was a game changer in getting the meeting, letting people know what amount of time that you want, having an upfront contract. Hey, I only want 30 minutes. And then, hey, I'll send you a list of questions in advance. That's huge. I hear of so many mentoring meetings where the mentee shows up and the mentor is like, great, what do you want to talk about? And the mentee's like, I don't know. I just thought it would be cool to meet. Yeah. And it's like, okay, this is never going to happen again. But be intentional. And if you get that meeting, a few things, just one, be early. We were talking about this. Be early is to be on time. 2, take notes in the meeting. Come with a notebook. book, because if people see you writing it, it'll value it, and you're much more likely to retain it. And then afterwards, thank them for it. Write them a thank you note and actually write, hey, Tim, thank you so much for meeting. Here were my 3 key takeaways and the things I'm going to do as a result of meeting with you. Thank you. Because then it's like, wow, it's intentional. And then if you want to meet with that person, which you won't always want multiple meetings, follow up with them 3 months later and reach out and say, hey, Tim, we met last time. Here's the 3 things you told me to do. I did them. Here's 3 more questions I have as a result. Can we meet again? If you do that, there's nobody that's not going to want to meet with you. And so, but
was that taught to you? Is that something you picked up these on the way? Like how did you, I mean, those are amazing. I think.
Yeah, the basic, I would say the foundation was set in my early 20s, and then I've built on it since, things that I've added. The other thing that I always throw in there that I'll add, that I love the story, is giving a gift to either the assistant, if there's an assistant involved, and the person, in something simple. So the story I heard, and John Maxwell shared this, the woman, I forget her name, that created the Aflac duck, she got a meeting with Warren Buffett. And basically, she did all of her research, which you should obviously research whoever you're meeting with, found out he loves Diet Cherry Coke. So before she went to the interview with Warren Buffett, she buys a small cooler, gets a Diet Cherry Coke in a glass bottle, and puts it in ice. She gets to the interview, never met Warren Buffett before, said, Mr. Buffett, thank you so much for taking this. They were supposed to have 10 minutes. I know in my research that you love Diet Cherry Coke, so I thought we'd start the interview with something that you love. Opens the cooler, ice cold Diet Cherry Coke right there. He takes the ice cold Diet Cherry Coke out, smiles and said, young lady, in all my years of doing interviews, no one's ever brought me a Diet Cherry Coke. You can have as much time as you want. She got an hour-and-a-half interview with Warren Buffett for $1.50 Diet Cherry Coke. Yes. And so, again, it's just going out of your way. John Maxwell always said this instilled in me, be unforgettable. Like, what can you do to be unforgettable? I think Dan Sullivan talks about how can you be in someone's top 21 relationships, like, because most people, that's the max amount that they have. Like, what can you do to stand out, to get in that, out of the pile and into that inner circle? That should be your goal.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking, so as you start to transition from, you have these mentors that have poured into you, and you transition down, and you're starting to mentor to other kids. What has that experience been like for you? And are you actively looking to provide mentorship? Are people doing what you did? They're reaching out to you based on maybe listening to the podcast, or kind of walk us through that experience for you.
Yeah, it's strange. I still view myself as like I'm just getting over the fact that I'm not a young leader. I'm 39. I'll be 40 this year, which is crazy. Yeah. I remember at Light of Life, there was an emerging leader meeting with our executive director, and I wasn't there. I just heard about it. And I was like, what? Why wasn't I invited? So I followed up. I'm like, how am I not in the emerging leader meeting? He's like, you're 37, man. And so I'm just getting into this zone. But yeah, I do get asked for a lot of meetings. And again, this is probably not sustainable long term because my assistant yells at me, but like I basically say yes because I don't know who I'm meeting with, who I'm going to pour into, or what that connection will lead to. So for me, yeah, I think things that I've learned on the front end is, man, I make people be intentional. So they may want to reach out and say like, oh, I want to meet with you. Great. I make my assistant basically ask like, what do they want to meet about? I want them to send questions to me in advance, and it's helping them grow.
That's
right. And 3, and I think something I'm learning because I don't have unlimited capacity is I'm providing so many ways to be mentored by me outside of meeting with me.
Right.
And so I just read a post by a guy named Chad Willardson, who basically says I get asked every second for coffee. And so he's starting to establish like, hey, I post every single day on social media something that add value to you. I have over 400 podcast episodes that you can listen to. So like, hey, do some of that stuff, and then maybe we can meet in 3 to 6 months because for the next 3 months, basically my schedule is booked. So I know that sounds raw, but that's what I'm trying to learn is like, I don't want to say who's
boundaries too, right? I think is that Sullivan too?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Like I don't want to say no one's worthy of my time, but it's just like I have limited time. So that's something I'm trying to discern as, how do I maximize that? And that's the best boundary I found so far.
I can relate to that transition. I just turned 41 and I'm still trying to find mentors,
Yeah.
I had a gap where I had mentioned this before too. I didn't really have mentors growing up. I kind of had to learn the hard way, and it was frustrating. I didn't even know what a mentor was really. But they started to come later in life, and that's when I was like, oh man, like this is incredible. And I needed to learn how to lean into those and continue those relationships. And then now I have this passion to try to, all right, for all those people that maybe didn't have mentorship,
yes,
growing up, how can I transition to that? But I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, I'm not ready for it yet.
Yeah.
I'm still too. too young for that, but yeah.
I don't think so. You could add a ton of value to young leaders, man.
But I feel like I'm a sponge right now hearing some of the things that you're saying. So it's really good.
And so when you think through your podcasting experience and the various leaders that you've had, I know you've had Mike Tomlin, you've had Anson Dorrance, you just had Clint Hurdle. What are some of your all-star list as you think back of some of the conversations that you've had that through that podcast experience have been really influential for you?
Yeah. It's like, picking your favorite kid. But when I'm asked this question, my favorite interview probably of all time was probably Clint Hurdle, interview 1. So he's been on 3 times now. But the first one, he was the manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And you just talk about mentorship, and again, first big interview for me. Even how I got the interview, my friend knew him and I was at a fundraiser. And he's like, oh, I'll tee you up. I'll set you up. I get in the room. He's like, Doug, this is Clint. And I'm like, that's all I get. Not like, hey, this kid has a podcast. He'd love for you to be on it. But I asked, and if you know Clint, man, huge heart. And he spent time, and in the interview, he just said something to me that always stuck with me, even going back to who do I spend time with. He goes, Doug, I hope that today, by spending time with you, you feel valued. I hope that you feel like you don't have to be a CEO of some big company here in Pittsburgh to spend time with the manager of the Pirates. I'm just a normal guy, and I value normal people. And he said, give people time. He's like, I'm at the gas station sometimes, and people want to give me a lineup. So I let them give me a lineup. And it just gave me such a bigger heart for people. Yeah. But I think that was special to me, too, because I was so nervous. I was walking to PNC Park, and within 5 minutes of being in his office, he made me feel so welcome. And so he was also one of those catalysts to help me get over that fear of, hey, he's just a normal person. Mike Tomlin's just a normal person. But for me on the insecurity side, that was a big deal. There's been so many others. I mentioned the Ken Coleman one. Ken's been a huge influence in my life, primarily because of the feedback. And if you actually go back and listen to the Ken Coleman feedback, I ask him on the podcast. So you can hear him coaching me on that. That one stands out. There's just so many, but those are 2 that come to mind off the top of my head.
That's fantastic. And so what are actionable kind of advice that you've given? You've given a lot already to how to start this, right? Being intentional, coming with your list. But what are some other of the pieces of advice that you've gotten over the years that have really made an impact on you?
Just from mentors?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Best piece of advice I've ever received. So John Maxwell is my hero of heroes. So that youth pastor, Larry Betancourt, he handed me a John Maxwell CD when I was 18. I did not know there was such a thing as leadership development. He gave me the CD. I listened to it. I felt like, for whatever reason, the way I'm wired, I felt like Neo in the Matrix. Something went off in me. And I transcribed the whole lesson by hand because I didn't know it came with notes. And I called the youth pastor and I said, I want you to give me everything you have by this man. And for years, I would listen to 2 or 3 hours of Maxwell every single night. Just became a huge disciple. So I would say he, more than anyone else, has shaped who I am. And in probably, 5 years ago now, I had the opportunity to have lunch with him, which was like the honor of a lifetime. And in the interview, I've always been, my nature is I'm a people pleaser. And I think that's always held me back in my leadership. And so I said, hey, how can I not basically people please, or what advice do you have for me? And he said, Doug, my CEO, Mark Cole, is wired just like you are. People, relational, but I had to come to Mark one day and I said, Mark, the good news is everybody loves you and everyone loves spending time with you. The bad news is your leadership is not good enough to get them to where they need to go or the company needs to go. I'm like, that's pretty brutal feedback. Yeah. And Maxwell said he was a people pleaser too. He said, but what I told Mark and what I had to do when I was young was I had to make the decision that I would always love people, but I would not depend on their love. And he said, you have to make the decision to always love people, but not depend on their love. And so for me, that changed, that was worth $1 million to me. And so that's been in my head every day since. And so when I'm facing tough people issues, which are always a challenge for me because I'm so emotional, I just always think, hey, I'm going to love this person, but whether or not they like me when it's over or whatever happens, if they hate me, if they post bad about me, that's okay. I'm not dependent on their love. I'm just responsible to love them the best that I can. And so that has been a game-changing piece of advice in my leadership journey for sure.
That's amazing. Wow. What were you hearing in those early videos or CDs that like clicked the Neo moment? Like what was it that
Everything, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I graduated high school with like a 1.6 GPA. Like I think it just goes back to having a vision of a different life. It was just like, oh my gosh, I can like get better as a person. Like I think in school, a lot of the personal development is focused on like learning knowledge about a specific subject, which but when I learned that I could get better, that I could become productive, that I could be a leader that people want to follow, that I could be a man of character, that I could like build a great life. Like that vision it still consumes me. The fact that I can be better today than I was yesterday, and I can be better tomorrow than I am today, there is no finish line. Like that's what drove me from the beginning, and that's what continued to drives me. And it's been 20 plus years now of personal growth and development from those early CDs.
So I want to dig into that, right? Because we are what we repeatedly do. And you, as I started this conversation saying you are one of the most intentional people I've ever met. So take us through your daily, weekly routines, monthly. I know you have annual routines. Like kind of walk us through some of the intentionality that you've built into your life to help you through that path to mastery, that path of continuous growth.
Yeah. One, I'll just preface this because when I get into systems with people, they get overwhelmed and they're like, that's crazy. I am not a systems and process person by nature at all. I hate them. But what I've been telling people, I love the outcome of having them. And I love the outcome and discipline of having them more than I hate not having them and not wanting to do them. So I've learned, Patrick Bet-David said this, he said, you're one system away from changing your life. And that's what I found. So everything in my life, I've tried to have a system for. And to be fair, I probably can be wound too tight on that end, too much where like on the therapy side, I need to chill out. So I want to preface that. But overall, I would say the systems that I share most often that have been beneficial for me is one, starting with a life plan. And so there's a great book by Michael Hyatt called Living Forward. I'd recommend for everyone. And it's basically creating a plan of your life, like beginning with the end in mind. So they encourage you to take a weekend away and basically think, hey, at the end of my life, in each bucket of my life, what do I want said? So, hey, in my marriage, what do I want Laura to say at the end of my life about the way I stewarded our marriage? What would I want my children to say about the way that I parented? What would I want those that I worked with vocationally to say about the work that I did? What would I want God to say spiritually about my life? What would I want to look back and talk about my physical health and fitness and the way I stewarded that? So once you kind of get a picture of the end in mind, that's the vision. And it's a vision for the end. So like, that's what constantly drives me because again, there's no finish line. It's like, I know where I want to end up, but I'm not going to get there in 5 years, 10 years, 20, like it's going to take a lifetime to get there. And so my life plan then informs my annual goals, which every year at the end of the year, I do a year-end review, which I journal all the time and I create this whole year-end report. But then I really spend a lot of time going through my life plan and planning out, hey, what do I want to accomplish in the next 12 years? And then, or next 12 months. And then I really try to, we're talking about EOS. I've tried to create a life where I live in 90-day segments, very similar to EOS. And basically, hey, what do I want to accomplish in the next 90 days? What do I need to do weekly to do that, daily to do that, et cetera? And basically, that becomes my productivity system for how I go after and accomplish goals. So that would be from more of like a big picture. Daily on the personal growth side, I usually spend an hour a day in my morning. Some people call it the miracle morning, I think by Hal Elrod. Yeah. So I don't follow that to a T, but in general, I wake up, man, I spend time with God. I have devotions. I try to read a chapter or two in a leadership book every single day. So that continually compounds. I journal, and then I basically prep for my day. I work out every day or try to. So that's a big part of my routine. And then with 5 kids, basically get everyone ready to go, and then I work, and then come home, and basically I'm basically with my families at night. The other system I'd mentioned that's been super helpful, and I would say I interviewed this one guy, Jim Shorkey, who's a local legend. He always said, make your downtime prime time, which is so funny to me. A corny saying, but it's true. And so like for me, my drives, I have an hour commute total each day. So I listen to podcasts. So you multiply that, however many days I'm working a year times an hour a day of intentionally listening to books or et cetera, like plus my hour in the morning, like that is a lot of input. And so now when I do things like this or podcasts, like stuff just comes out because we put so much in. The only other thing I'll add, just if people are intentional about family, is my wife and I, this has been a game changer for our marriage and work life. My wife's an executive at a software company, very busy with 5 kids. We have a weekly family team meeting. And so for an hour and a half every Saturday, my wife and I meet. go through our calendar, go through our finances. We do an exercise where we encourage each other and challenge each other in our marriage, talk about our kids, and get on the same page. It's basically, in EOS words, it's a same page meeting every single week with my wife. And eventually you bring your kids into that. Our kids are a little young for that now, but that's been an absolute game changer and pretty much the only way we've survived in the season that we're in. So those are some of the systems that I'd encourage.
Yeah, all that, and you are fanatical about your diet as well.
Try to be, yes. Fat Dougie comes out once in a while, but yes. Yeah.
So
I do Miracle Morning too. I think you named most of those.
You had him in, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I did an event with him.
I didn't get to go to that.
I got to meet him, and yeah, it was really good.
It's amazing.
But silence, affirmations, visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing. So I think,
boom,
for the most part, yeah. And you can do it.
Do you follow that?
I do, yeah.
Pretty consistently? Good.
Yeah, and it goes through stages. Like actually, it's one of the things. I'm not Catholic, but I also like during Lent to try to, either improve something or remove something. And I'm leaning back in basically starting today to do it every single day for the next 40 days. Because sometimes it's a couple, but not all, but it is kind of transformational whenever you can do all of those.
Yeah.
Whether it's in 15 minutes or an hour and 15 minutes. Right. Yeah. And I've gone through, I think I'm going to learn a few things from what you said today. I've gone through some of those exercises, but I haven't read Michael Hyatt's book, so I need to do that.
It's a little fluffy, but in general, if you get the template, that's pretty much all you need.
Yeah, that's really good.
I shouldn't say that.
I will say too. I mean, we know this with just in the people business. I love that you and your wife have this hour and a half kind of same page meeting, and I've tried to implement this in my family, and I just haven't been able to pull it off yet. So yeah, I'll need to get some more.
So you want it, but your wife doesn't?
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
We're the opposite.
Okay.
Yeah, Laura sends me a staff meeting agenda every Saturday morning, 6:30 a.m., and I'm like, but I love the outcome. So
yeah, I've got to.
You want to try it.
I got to use my sales skills a little bit more to get her to buy in, but so far. And I was like, all right, we'll set up, EOS, right? I'll even subscribe to 90 as my family, use it for family to build out our VTO and our 90, our yearly goals, 90-day rocks. We'll have our L10 every weekend, just haven't.
Maybe don't make it so structured.
Work in progress.
Like literally ours is just a bullet point list we go through. Like, what do you want to talk about? And even, I don't know if it'll help you tell your wife, but it's like one exercise we do is called a 3-to-1. So every week, hey, what are 3 things that I saw you specifically do this week that I loved? So it's intentional encouragement. And then there's what's one thing I did that drove you crazy that if I'd ever do it again, you want to kill me. Yeah. And again, it's every week it's an opportunity to make your marriage better. So even if it's like we just meet and have that conversation, maybe she would enjoy that. I don't know. I don't know your wife.
Yeah.
I don't have enough time for the one. That's my problem. For her telling me all the things I do.
It's the 3-to-1 option, right?
It's one, but it's been 20 years.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. So amazing, just the intentionality, and now you're helping others go through that same intentionality and changing lives at Light of Life every single day. Share a little bit about that and your ability, because while you never formally went into ministry, you are in ministry every single day doing what you do. And so tell us a little bit of just that and how that's impacted your life and the lives of others.
Yeah, well, when I first got to Light of Life, I certainly never thought I would make a career out of it. I literally thought I was going to be there for a year and then leave and be on staff at a church. But that's when I found out about my sister and brought my sister in and really fell in love. My boss, I was the volunteer coordinator, which how I'm wired. I was the worst volunteer coordinator in history. But they said, hey, you're good with people. You should try fundraising. So that worked out well. But for the impact, my sister was with Light of Life for 9 years, in and out of our programs. And through my sister's story and through getting to know the people that we serve on a daily basis for 14 years, the work that we do, it's life or death. Dead serious. Like someone could walk in our doors today, and if they have a good experience, it could lead to transformation. They could have a bad experience or leave, and we never see them again. Tonight could be their last night. I mean, and so we always say that our frontline staff, we stand on the gates of hell and do everything that we can to help people. And as long as someone's breathing, there's hope. We lost my sister. We are a faith-based organization. And so we did lose my sister, and naturally that's not what I wanted to happen. But my sister did come to know Christ through Light of Life. And so even for us as a faith-based organization, we believe that eternally, like, I still win. Like, I'm going to see my sister again because of that. But as long as someone's breathing at Light of Life, there's hope for them. And I think so many people have this notion of like, oh, I would never know someone that's homeless, or people that are homeless or need a shelter, they're just dumb, or they made bad decisions, or they're lazy. And a lot of times nothing's farther from the truth. I always tell people we're all one or two decisions, even in the state that we're in right now, decisions away from being the exact same place the men, women, and children that we serve are at. And I tell people, if you had to go through a fraction of what some of the men, women, and children that are in our programs have had to go through, you'd be lucky to be in the position. I mean, even my sister losing her mom at a young age, and just really, really sad circumstances. And so,
do any of those stories stand out? Like, what's a story that really stands out and someone that you were able to
of transformation? Yeah, the one I always share. I won't share the person's name, but it was in 2014. I think we have two graduation ceremonies every year, and one of the women who graduated from our women's program, she, through her addiction, got to a point where she weighed like 92 pounds. I mean, she still posts before and after pictures, and literally, like, death was at her doorstep, even just, and I didn't know her then, but just looking at the picture. And that's where she was when she came to us. And at this graduation, so we have long-term programs where women and men can live with us from 9 months to 2 years, and we help them with their recovery, we help them with education and employment. Well, she ends up going through our program. She had a son prior to coming to our program and lost custody, which is very common with the women who come through our doors. Lost custody because of the decision she had, and literally he was 3 years old, so didn't see him from that time on. And ended up having 4 more kids throughout her journey. The other kids were much younger. And so we're at this graduation ceremony, and she was sharing how she was 92 pounds on that door, came to Light of Life, started transforming her life. And she said the most powerful thing that happened at this point was reuniting with my son. And he's actually graduating high school, and he's here tonight. And this kid, I had no idea who was there. It was like a Hallmark movie. This kid stands up, this was not planned, runs down the aisle and embraces his mom, and then the 4 other kids run and embrace her as well. I'm like, wow. Okay, God, if you keep doing that, like, and not every story ends like that. Clearly with like my sister, like it's not, hey, everything is bright and shiny, but those are the stories we live with. And she ended up getting her bachelor's degree from Penn State. I believe she just finished her master's degree recently, is working, has an amazing family, is an amazing mom, is married again. Like, her life is back together. And that's why we exist at Light of Life, to see stories like that, just like mine. Like, we live for life transformation. And so
how do you, and it's faith-based, right? Mm-hmm. How do you introduce the faith part into that, right? Because it is, I'm sure there are non-faith-based places as well. Like, how
people always ask, so we don't force it, and so there are elements in our programming that have to do with faith in God, and we encourage people to go to a church. But we've had people, and again, we've had people go through our entire program and never become a person of faith. And so I would say we still do all the natural elements that focus on recovery, education, employment, all the natural things. And so we don't force anything. But if people are open to it, and again, usually it's conversation. We have chapel services. It's in programming. A lot of our case managers are people of faith. And so their conversations may naturally lead to like, hey, and I'll say this, that a lot of people think that people don't want faith as part of their programming. There was a study recently internationally about people that are living on the street and that are experiencing homelessness. When surveyed, 70% of them say that they would prefer to be in a program that has some element of faith in it. Because it makes a huge, huge difference. Like, I, just as a believer myself, I can't imagine going through anything, let alone experiencing homelessness, without a deep faith in God. And so, we incorporate it throughout our programming, but certainly never force it down.
And as a believer, if the Holy Spirit is at work in those situations, it's no matter what you do, that's another level that that you're able to put in there that probably likely causes these transformations and running down the aisle. And it's amazing.
You've had people go through the program and ultimately start a career at Light of Life and gone from client side to staff side as well, correct?
Yeah. If you've ever been to Light of Life to serve meals, you likely have met Hutch. Yeah. Hutch is, I think we have currently around 12 or 13 people currently employed who are former graduates, which is about 10% of our staff, which is awesome. But Hutch graduated, I want to say in like 2008. But he was an alcoholic his whole life. His story is incredible. He ended up passing out in a, as he would say, a crick bed. I think that's a Yinzer term, but a crick bed, and basically cried out to God, like, God, if you get me out of this one jackpot, man, I'll dedicate the rest of my life to you. And so came to Light of Life, went through our program, thought he was done, and his case manager was like, you're not done. You still need some work. Because sometimes we just need more time. Yeah. Give him more time. And so they love this guy. And Rob, our kitchen manager, went to him and he said, hey, how do you like to come cook? And he was like, well, I can cook for myself, but I don't know how to cook for the masses. And he's like, well, we'll teach you. And to have someone like Hutch, one, he's awesome with volunteers. But what's beautiful is he was in the exact same position that the men and women who are coming through our food line are in, and he gets to know them, and he builds relationship. And if they start having a bad day or flipping out or doing whatever, he can put his arm around and say, brother, sister, it's going to be okay. Hey, I was in your same shoes. I was passed out in a crick bed and thought that was going to be the end of my life, but God, but Light of Life, and everything changed for me, and look where I am now. And so that's the beautiful thing about having people who have been through our program on staff is that real world experience and interaction they have with the clients, because they can clearly impact them in ways that I couldn't having that experience.
There's a song right now on country radio and by Jelly Roll, and but I love the song, and I think about you and I think about Light of Life every time I hear it, and the lyrics go, no one enters these doors on a winning streak, right? And it's his experience of showing up in AA, I believe, meeting, and feeling awful about himself, and the counselor there is a Hutch, right? Is someone that went through the same experience, and he basically looks at him in the eye and said, no one comes through these doors on a winning streak, wow. Right? But you're going to get okay,
yes,
right? There is light at the end of this tunnel, and I've walked this path, right? And so as you think about mentorship again, right, and tying this all back together, there's such power in mentorship of people that have walked the path that you see in front of you.
Yeah.
And to know that someone else has blazed that trail and they can guide you and mentor you and encourage you, because there's so much a life that we just need hope to be able to move forward. And that's, I think, a large part of what a mentor can do is to provide that hope.
What came up when you said that is leadership. We're talking to leaders and a leadership podcast. It takes great courage to acknowledge that you have a need. And I think it's especially true of leaders. I think Henry Cloud shared some statistic that 80% of CEOs don't have a single person that they can confide in. And, at Light of Life, I remember a graduate sharing his story via video, and he said how he got to Light of Life was it got so bad, his kids dropped him off. And the way he phrased it, just simple words, but he just said, the most humiliating day of my life. And this guy was a successful businessman prior to this, but alcohol kind of ruined his life. And we always talk about, man, the courage it takes. Like, you think about it, it's like, I'm going to walk through a shelter today and hope that I can get, saying that I need a meal, I need a bed tonight. I may need help because I have an addiction. Whatever your need is. And tying that back to mentorship, don't be so prideful that you think you're the know-it-all leader. Like, no one is as smart as all of us. And so we all need to come to a place where we acknowledge our needs. And, we always talk about community. Like, I believe every leader and every person on the planet needs a community in which they're fully known, fully loved, and fully challenged. And yes, you need one-off mentors that you can grab coffee with here and there and learn from, but you need a consistent community that can constantly sharpen. I know you're in YPO, you're in Vistage, I'm in mastermind groups. Like, talk about mentorship. I mean, sometimes I think we underestimate the value of being mentored by our peers and having peer groups. And I'd love to hear you guys share your experience there, but acknowledging the need and saying, wow, I'm not the only one dealing with this is huge.
Absolutely. And, the thing that's kind of on my heart right now too, is there are people that are out there that could be listening to this podcast that are functional alcoholics, right? You can be an alcoholic and still be a CEO, right? Still be listening to this podcast, and to be able to speak directly to them right now and say there is hope, right? That there is opportunity to become intentional, to change your life, and to ultimately get to that vision of where you want to be. And so that tying it back to your life plan, right? And being able to visualize where you want to be at a certain age or at the end of your life, or writing your obituary, or however you want to think about that, right? Being able to get there and say, okay, what do I need to do to be able to get to where I want to be?
Yeah, the functional alcoholic thing, I mean, I'm passionate about that because I feel like I've had many people come to me in their life for whatever reason. I feel like people feel like I'm a safe place to go to and have shared, like, man, I'm struggling with alcohol, or their spouses have shared that with me. And, I've been able to have the opportunity to help have some of those conversations. And I guess my encouragement would be, one, if you don't think you have a problem or don't know, the first step in AA is acknowledging you have a problem, but asking the people about you, like, hey, people around you, and it's just feedback, like, hey, is there anything in my life that you feel like is destructive or is impacting you in a negative way? Because you may not even be aware. Maybe your spouse says, you know what, like, I think you drink too much. Well, Nope. Listen to your wife and maybe have a conversation. And, I had a mentor, Rick Warren said this. He said, I think we'd have a lot, what did he say? I think we'd have a lot, he said something along the lines of, like, I think we'd have a lot less moral failure if we had a lot more of confession of temptation. And my mentor said to me, Doug, he said, he was speaking to my mastermind group. And he said, guys, if you're struggling with something, you don't have to tell everyone, but you have to tell someone. And his encouragement to us was, the people you can tell are the people in this room because they couldn't care less what you're going through, but it's because they couldn't care more. And you need those type of relationships. Maybe it's a counselor, maybe it's a safe person that you want to meet with, but don't be afraid to acknowledge and confess what you're going through before, because again, you may think you're fine. 6 months, a year from now, what if you lose your family as a result of your decisions? Or what if you, like the graduate we had at Light of Life, man, it gets so bad that your kids are dropping you off at a shelter when you were just a CEO of a company 6 months. I mean, those things happen way more regularly than people talk about.
So you're helping people with this, or do you have peer groups around you for situations where you're also needing that? Sometimes we can get caught up helping others and forget about ourselves.
Yeah, I've been in a mastermind group for the past. I was in one for 10 years. The current one I'm in has been 3, and that is my safe spot. And I would say for all the guys there, the thing I would encourage leaders to do, because I do find a lot of leaders may have visage groups. If you don't have a community that you're consistently meeting with, you have to find that. Yeah. But where I'd also challenge leaders and where I've missed it in the past. And I could go into this. I had a whole season of burnout. 9 months after my sister died, I basically had what I would call a mental breakdown. It probably wasn't an actual mental breakdown, but something happened to me. And for the first time in my life, like, I didn't know if I'd be able to work again. I ended up going to therapy, and therapy was a game changer for me. Like, going into deep parts, like, basically, my therapist got me to a point where he said, Doug, like, I don't think you've ever grieved losing your mom. I don't think you've grieved losing your sister or anyone in your life. He said, you can't say goodbye to something you never said hello to, and made me walk through this whole process of grief that I didn't even know was an issue. And I don't know that would have come up in a mastermind group setting, just naturally, because usually you're bringing up things that you see. Hey, guys, I'm struggling with this. Right. That was so deep of, like, I'm experiencing things that I can't even... Well, hey, let's get to the root of that, and sometimes therapy can really help with that.
So that's one-on-one therapy, right? Yep. And you've been doing that on and off for 4 years. Yeah, I took some time off. Do you do spousal therapy as well, or just one-on-one? Like,
we haven't maritally, and again, we can talk about marriage. Like, Laura and I dated for 10 years before we were married, and I had to grow up a lot. Like, I felt like Laura and I always tell people, if you can go through all the hell and fighting and things on the front end of marriage, it's way better because you know exactly what you're going into. Yeah. That's just how Laura and I's journey. Yeah. So honestly, it's like, I'm not saying we never have issues, but our marriage has been heaven on earth since we've been married. But to get there was a lot of work. And so we haven't, but I would highly encourage it, if that makes sense. We're both in mastermind groups and in community, but and we wouldn't be opposed to it. I don't want to sound prideful and say, like, we'd never need to, or we just haven't.
Yeah. No, I think the peer groups are phenomenal, and that's one piece of the puzzle, right? I once again, I'd said that before. I didn't really have mentorship kind of growing up, and then when I got exposed to a peer group where, in some ways we're all going through, similar situations, right? Leading a company, the trials and tribulations, the ups and downs, and not really feeling like you have somebody you can talk to about that, right? You've got your leadership team that you can, you're in the battle with, but there's some things you just can't, like, you need somebody else to bounce things off of and to lean into. And sometimes, there's certain things you can talk to your spouse about that and other things that you can't, right? Like, in the day to day. And so that's been, I try not to use this lightly, but like transformational having that, because it became almost like a board of advisors as well as like mentorship, and it opens up for, in a confidential setting, business, life, personal, family, all of that combined. Yeah, it's
I'm curious. This has been my experience. Like, were you surprised on how personal it gets? Like, when you first jumped in, like, were you thinking, hey, it's all going to be business, but it's like, wow, what actually matters to people is a lot more about their family and their personal issues.
Yeah. I was prepared for that. I wasn't sure. And you have to build trust, right? Even in a confidential setting, you still have to build trust. You say like, it can be surface level. And then the more vulnerable people get, they help other people get, okay, he was able to open up about this, or she was able to open up about it. So now I can maybe feel more comfortable doing it myself. But it ends up being a lot of personal stuff, right? Because that impacts everything, right? And I needed that, right? And it's been really good.
Awesome.
So good up.
So glad you found it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, my Visage Group's been critical to my success. I tell every leader you need two things for success. You need an operating system.
There we go.
And you need a peer group. Like,
come on.
I truly believe that, right? Because you have to have that sounding board as we're discussing. And more importantly, you have to be around people that are willing to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And a lot of times your team won't tell you the truth. Your direct reports aren't going to look at you and go, "You are a horrible boss," unless they're walking out the door, right? Yeah. And so you need to be able to hear the truth. I always use the analogy: if I look in the mirror and I see Brad Pitt looking back at me, I know I'm delusional.
I don't know, man. That goatee.
Oh yeah,
no, working
new
on
look,
it.
40 pounds down. But you've got to be able to see that accurate reflection, and a great peer group is going to love you enough to provide that accurate reflection.
Yeah.
Right. And to be able to speak truth into you. And then, the systems and process to execute and to be able to run your business. I think that, in your life, I think you need all these things are connected, right? We like to think of, we got our professional life over here. We have our personal life over here. We've got our faith over here. Yep. The reality is we're one human being, right? And we're dealing with all of these things and at the same time. And trying to juggle all of them, like juggling. You've talked through how intentional you are in every aspect of your life. And oh, by the way, you have 5 kids and a wife that also demand your time, energy, attention, right? And so there's this constant flow.
Let's talk about this, the perfect triangle, right? Yeah. If you can get the family, the personal, and the business all, equally on this, but typically, I think we maybe talked about this, but it's typically 2, right? You can never get all 3, right? And when you're spending time on business and you feel like that's good and family's doing well, but you're not able to keep up on the personal side, or personal and family's good and the business is suffering. It feels like for me that I've never been able to get all 3 right at the same time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, to reflect on that, right? That's why I think the peer group's so important as well, because, right, my instincts are to focus on my business and my family, which means I have to forego my friends. But I need my friends to be the sounding board to tell me when I screw up on my faith and my family.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. In my business. And so, all of these things just kind of connect to be able to help you build that structure in your life to have the right process model and sounding boards. Yeah. So you've come so far in your journey. You've impacted so many lives. You've already fed us with so much great advice and insights. But, if you were going to go back to talk to that teenage Doug, what would you tell him? What would you want to be able to communicate to yourself back then?
Yeah, I think if I had to tell him anything, I'd just tell him, hey, you're a leader. Like, don't waste half of your life questioning whether or not you're a leader. Eric Guy, who's a mutual friend, I remember him saying something to me that was like a game changer. He said, Doug, the question isn't like, are you going to lead or are you a leader? Like, stop asking that. The question is, what do you want to lead? Like, when you're a leader, the question is really, what do you want to set your hand to? And I think we were talking about being a young leader. I think I was so insecure and so worried about Am I a leader? Am I not? And again, we live in this high influencer space where, you know, I'm all or nothing. Like, I want to be John Maxwell. So it's like, that's my standard. I'm like, I have no idea if I even deserve to be on the same like room as him. But yeah, that's what I would tell myself is like, you're a leader, be confident in that and just lead, and then choose what you want to lead and give your life away to that.
Awesome.
That's really good. What's it look like for you 5 years from now? What's that plan? I know you've got it.
No, this might surprise you. So this was the life lesson. My pastor, I went through like an identity crisis when I left the church world. That's where, because I thought I was going to be a mega church pastor. That's what I wanted to be. And when I left, man, literally, like I was actually depressed when I started working at Light of Life because I saw no path to my plan of being a mega church pastor. And my pastor just said, Doug, never put a period where God puts a comma. Never put a period where God puts a comma. And when I look back, it's funny. I always tell people this, like just following God's journey for my life. Like if you would have ever told me that I'd be in fundraising, I would have laughed at you and been like, what? What does that have to do with anything? Yeah. Or like leading a rescue mission. But it's funny, like that, what did I want when I wanted to be a mega church pastor? I wanted to impact a lot of people. I saw pastors doing it. Wow, they get to influence all these people and transform lives. That's all I really wanted. And what I love about God is He brought me to Light of Life, and at Light of Life, we're connected with 300 plus churches in the local region. We're connected with businesses. We're connected with like thousands, and so now, and again, this is just my personal thing. Like, I'm like, wow, if I was looking back, personally, and again, God could speak to me tomorrow to go pastor a church, but I was like, wow, like I would just feel like I was in a bubble personally with the way I'm wired. I'm more of like a kingdom, like big picture person. And God put me into a place where I have a lot more influence than I thought I would. So He answered my prayer of where I wanted to go just in a way I never saw He did. So I think that would be where I want to be in 5 to 10 years, leading something significant for God, but I'll let Him decide what that is and when that is, because I never imagined getting to where I am now. So I have a great operating system, but I'm very open to my future.
So it's on your heart that there is something we're just waiting to get the get the calling.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, for me, it's just being faithful where you are. So God, what did you put in my hands right now? And
do that well. Yeah,
and again, I know we're getting a little spiritual, but like I just posted about this the other day on social. The thing I've gotten in my heart about what's next is like, you'll know. And it's funny, this would be another piece of advice to my thing. I've gone out with Tim before and said like, what am I doing with my life? Like, what should I do? Because I'm trying to figure it out. But God has continually spoken to me in my quiet times. You'll know. Like, and I keep wondering, like, is this it? Like, I'll know. Like, I'm not going to question. I'm not going to be like, is it like, I'm going to know. And so that's what I feel like, whatever's next, whether it's next steps at Light of Life or elsewhere, like, I'm going to know. And when that door opens, I'll step through it. But until then, I'm going to take what God put in my hand, which is the assistant executive director in L3 in my family right now. And I'm going to do the best I can to be faithful with what He's put in my hand.
It's a peace beyond human understanding. You'll know.
Let's go.
Yeah. I know we're getting, I personally, I like getting into the spiritual side a little bit, but
okay. I don't know that.
Absolutely.
But and you said quiet time, and that's typically where we are starting, Lent today as well. So good timing. But sometimes I don't take the time or the quiet time to be able to get that to be able to hear that message, I think I know, but I'm not real sure, and I can't really figure it out. I know it'll come to me whenever I do, but those times that I take and do my quiet retreats or spiritual retreat, prayer, whatever you want to call it, and typically it's 2 to 3 days off the grid. I mean, that's whenever you can really, for me at least, I get clarity around that, from chaos to clarity. Yeah.
And part of what I'm hearing though through both of your stories, and I know through my story, we only know the pivotal moments of our life through looking backwards. Right? It's the hindsight's what's 20/20, right? Like showing up to a high school Bible study within it in itself doesn't seem like this hugely transformative, pivotal moment in your life.
I knew this was going to be it.
Right?
You didn't know. Yeah.
But looking back, can you imagine now walking through those doors? Like, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? And so there's so many moments like that. And so I think that this is one of the things that's been on my heart, because like, I am blessed that I am friends and get to hang out with some of the most driven, intentional leaders in this city, right? And I love my group. But I also feel that often we put way too much pressure on ourselves, right? we have this, like, because we want to live up to the best of our calling, right? And to impact as many lives as we can, and to step into the greatness that God's called us to step into, right? We put so much pressure, right? And the reality is, what I can't remember the exact quote, but essentially, nothing makes God laugh more than hearing our plans for our life, right? Like, it's his plan that matters. It's not ours, right? And so the best that we can do is to lean into every single moment and to be intentional, be where you are when you're there, right? And it's back to the quote you started, right? What was it? If you
don't start where you are, you stay where you are, yeah.
Exactly, right? You just start where you are and be intentional, be open to hearing God's calling and message to us, be open to others and their needs and how we can mentor them and impact their lives, and just kind of move forward. I don't know. It's because I don't think we can force that big life pivotal moment either, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
definitely not.
I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting thought, right? Maybe to kind of leave is just to say, listen, there's been a lot of moments throughout our lives that we just don't know at the moment that it's going to have as big of impact in that conversation, right? Of you going back to your school and saying this to me in your office.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the other thing I would say is that happens both ways. Like, one of the most impactful things that was said to me in high school was very negative, right? I was told that I was too stupid to graduate from high school.
Wow.
Right? By a teacher.
Did you go back and have?
I wanted to, especially when we sold the business. I wanted to. Right?
Still have a chance.
Exactly. But it's just you speak into each other's lives, and you can have a moment and just try to make the most of every moment with that intentionality.
There's 1,000 things I want to follow up on there, but with the bad teacher, I'm curious. I've been poking people in my interviews with this. There's a book by Patrick Bet-David called "Choose Your Enemies Wisely," and he actually talks about teachers saying that And I was talking to Clint Hurdle about this, and he actually said it depends how you're wired. Some people, their enemies can drive them, and it's a healthy thing. Other people, it's just not their thing. But I'm curious, did that teacher, it drove you?
Oh, it drove me.
Okay.
So I can go off in a big tangent, but I've been very open lately, like over the last
drove you you had their picture on the wall with to kill anyway. That's bad. That's Billy Madison. I didn't mean that. Cut that.
But I had dyslexia my entire life, right? And when I was growing up, there were no real shining examples of successful people with dyslexia, right? No one talked about it. And now there's a lot of visionary CEOs have changed the world, Richard Branson and others that all, right, are wired that way. And so back in this moment, I was, I can't spell anything. And I joke around with my EOS clients. I write on a dry erase board all day, every day, and 90% of the words are misspelled. And I tell them on Focus Day, our first day together, like, hey, listen, just so you know, God's given me a lot of gifts. He's given me some things I'm really bad at. This happens to be one of the things I'm really bad at. So if you can't read what I'm writing, just ask, and I'll tell you, right? But the teacher saw I couldn't spell and just ripped me. Wow. And ridiculed me and told me I was too stupid to graduate from high school and on and on and on. Oh, by the way, in front of the entire class.
What's her name? No, I'm kidding.
Right? Yeah, Mr. Hipley. I'll never forget the guy. Oh, yeah, I'll call him out, right? I'll never forget it, right?
Mr.
But, that stuck with me. And you've talked about, your insecurities, and we all have them. And I had them. And honestly, it's funny how God kind of hits you between the eyes at times in your life. And when I was hit between the eyes on this was when my daughter was diagnosed with dyslexia. And she was struggling with the same self-doubt and the same belief that she was stupid. And something snapped in me, and it's almost like I don't think I would change it, but I was a little embarrassed that I snapped. But my daughter had just found out she was dyslexic, said how stupid she was and how she wasn't going to be able to do the things that she wanted to do, and on and on and on. And I just snapped, and I said, Hannah, do you think your dad's stupid? And she looked at me like I punched her, right? And she's like, no, right? And I'm like, do you think I've been successful in my life? Yeah. And I'll never forget, we were actually in the car in Maui, like on a really nice vacation, right?
Yeah.
But like everything we have, like, do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I'm a failure? Do you, right? No. Then I looked at her and I said, you or me. You or me. And from that, right, fast forward, she's freshman in high school. She's got a 4.3 GPA. She's in all APs. She skipped a year in math. She is brilliant. But the reality is, God wires our brains differently. And the way I think and the way I process information and the way my daughter does is different than maybe the way you two do, right? But that doesn't mean either one of us is right or wrong, right?
And
but
how you're motivated to do it. Maybe she's not motivated by that.
Exactly.
The enemy, right? But
and she's like, okay, I know now I can and be this. But that guy motivated me my entire life, right? And drove me to be successful.
Does he still, or after you sold the company, did you feel like you got healed from that? Or do you need therapy?
I've done okay. I'm over it now, right?
Yeah. Okay.
But I'll tell you. But I'll tell you.
I thought I saw his picture at the EOS thing.
Shh, don't tell my secrets. But I still. It wasn't, I had hidden the fact I was dyslexic my entire adult life until my daughter was, until that moment in the car in Maui. And then I thought to myself, because this is when God laughed at me. He's like, Tim, if you're shameful of this, don't you think your daughter's going to be? If you hide this and you think it's a black mark, and if you think this makes you a lesser man, don't you think your daughter's going to think the same thing about herself? Wow. And that's when it flipped.
Breaking the chain.
And so I now say God blessed me with dyslexia.
That's good.
Because I believe it helped me get to where I am.
Yeah.
Right? But it's that perspective. Right? But I would never have known that back in the day, I guess, is kind of the point of this and tying this all back. It's not until hindsight.
Yeah.
And it's not until seeing other people, right? And part of the mentorship, mentoring my daughter and seeing what she was struggling with. And I think ultimately this comes to, we have to admit our weaknesses.
Yep.
We have to admit our temptations, as you said. We have to admit our weaknesses. We are all flawed human beings. And there's, I think, this black cloud over CEOs in this world that they all feel they have to be perfect. And they all feel like they have to be the shining model to their organizations. And the reality is we're all as screwed up as the next person.
Yep.
And so that's why I love this podcast, right? This is why we came up with it. You can't make this shit up. Because the whole point of this is to be able to create a forum where people can talk about their black spots, talk about the spots in their lives that aren't perfect, that they screwed up, and the lessons learned through that, and to show everyone that's listening that you can come through this and get to a spot on the other side where you're celebrating those failures. No failure has to be permanent.
Yeah.
Right? It's just a spot in time.
Yeah, there's a lot of, like you said earlier, I don't know where to go, but there's so many good things there. I do think we need to do a better job as leaders talking about our weaknesses but sometimes we don't even know what they are, right? They're called blind spots for a reason, and we need, sometimes it's also figuring out what those weaknesses are and diving into that a little bit too. And sometimes I love the story you told, I think it was, what's the name? The book was, I think it's the 7 Primal Questions. We're talking, and a lot of times these are imprinted on you when you're young, right? And whether that's, why you're, I need to be loved, or I need to be, I need to be successful, or I need to have impact, or, whatever those questions are. I need to be wanted, or noticed. those things are imprinted at a young age, and they affect us. And then we, a lot of times unknowingly, transfer those same things down to our kids, right? It's like if it's our dad, or we're trying to get attention or whatever it is to show success so that he'll notice me because I have 4 brothers that I'm trying to compete with attention or whatever it is, right? And then you can pass that down if you're not careful with, why am I doing this? Why am I like this? But it sounds like for you, right, that imprint that happened at a young age has had a huge impact on you.
Yep.
And then you had this moment in time with your daughter where you were able to break the chain, right? Because that could then go to her and then to her.
Kids, come
right?
on.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I love what you said about unrealistic expectations. My season of meltdown or whatever I had in 2020, I met with my therapist, and I thought I had no capacity. I'm like, I'm never going to be able to work again. And he said, and I was asking about that. He said, Doug, I find that it's often not about burnout, because there's people that can, sleep 3 hours a night and work 20, and be fine. Usually when people talk to me about burnout, I find that it's them having unrealistic expectations of themselves internally. And that was a game changer for me, because I'm an all or nothing personality. So if I'm not John Maxwell in leadership, I'm nothing. If I'm not The Rock physically, I'm nothing. If I'm not Dave Ramsey financially, like that's how I lived my life. And the pressure that I put on myself. And I have to be careful not to go there. Like, I really have to be intentional. John Maxwell told a mentor of mine, he said, his name was Matt, but he would say, Matt, if God wants to make you a name, let him do that. And that's something that's kind of resonated. Like, okay, like I'm not responsible. My other mentor, John Stallworth, he said, I stopped counting or trying to figure out the impact that God was going to make on my life a long time ago. When you let it go and just let him do his thing. I was listening to some guy yesterday, sorry, all these listening, but he said, man, we live in America and everyone wants to be bigger. Like, no one is okay with just being a small town barber. And I do think that's a problem with our culture. And I was trying to wrestle with that, because I'm like, I do always want to be bigger. Is that because I'm a leader and I'm naturally wired that way? Or is that something that I need to like lay down before God and really submit? That's something I'm wrestling through. Where do you think that came from? The one to be, I think it is part of how I'm wired. But again, it's just impact.
But like maybe where do you think that wiring happened? Do you think have you thought about that? Yeah,
I do think, going back to like choose your enemies wisely, like I do think, I hear a lot of people talk about kids with experiences like I have. There actually can be an advantage versus kids who are more privileged and have money, because they don't have a chip on their shoulder, where usually first generation wealth, they had to earn it. They like know the hustle and grind and the price they had to pay, where second gen didn't have to pay that price. So I do feel like I'm that first gen, like, hey, I'm going to pay a price and I'm going to make the biggest, like, I want to do it all, see it all, be it all, make the biggest impact. Like, I just naturally think like that. But I do think it can be somewhat of me trying to prove to myself that I'm something, because I'm never content just with who I am. It's like, that's not enough. Great, I have this many listeners, great, and so I do wrestle with that. But I think it's this drive of my enemies from when I was little. Like, okay, I'll show everyone in high school. I'll show this high school. I had, teachers say something similar to me. I have family members that never thought I'd do anything, friends. And so, yeah.
So similarly, like somebody
I would say
basically you're not going to be able to do this, or family or friends or somebody that kind of imprinted that on at a young age, that maybe you're still proving to them that like, I can do this, right?
Yeah, and I could be looking too into it. At the end of the day, like John Maxwell said, at some point in your growth, you stop asking, like, I forget what he said first asking, but you basically get to a point where you ask, how far can I go? Like, that becomes what's important. And that's how I feel. Like, man, how far can I go in this life? Like, I think that's a healthy thing too. It's like, hey, I've done a lot. I do feel like, similar to you, like, hey, I've gotten to a place where it's like, I know I'm a leader. I don't have to worry about that. I feel like Laura and I have been successful and we're in a great place. And, I feel like that, like if they're like, hey, I have to prove myself, I feel like that's over. But it's like, okay, God's given me these gifts, this capacity, this influence. Like, God, how far can we go with this?
Yeah.
But let you do it and not me. I think that's the issue.
There's another great book called Halftime. I don't know.
Bob
I don't
Buford.
feel like we're there yet, but like
39.
we're getting. I think there's an argument for that, but from success to significant, right? And that's Buford.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Doug. This has been an amazing conversation. I just absolutely love hanging out with you. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share before we wrap up here?
I don't think so. We covered so many things. I would just say, go make a difference, be intentional. Have a support system around you and have an operating system, and you'll be all right, in the words of Tim Tannert.
Yes, I love it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Doug. Absolutely love having you here, and congratulations on everything that you've done in the lives that you've impacted. You're quite the inspiration.
Likewise. Thank you both of you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.